The night Indiana Fever shocked everyone. She was down 16 points. The crowd had gone silent, and every expert had already written Indiana off. But nobody told Caitlin Clark the game was over. Before this night ends, you're going to see a teammate do something so raw and so loyal that the entire arena stops breathing. You're going to watch a 16-point disaster turn into a 20-point demolition. And you're going to understand why the rest of the WNBA should genuinely be afraid of what Indiana is becoming. Stay with me, because the moment that changes everything, it doesn't happen where you think it does. Real quick, if you're new here and you love breakdowns that actually go deeper than the highlights, hit subscribe right now. We cover these games the way they deserve to be covered. Every detail, every shift, every moment that the box score can't explain. Now, let's get into it. Let's set the scene honestly, because if you didn't watch this game live, you need to understand just how bad it looked early on. Gainbridge Fieldhouse was packed. The energy before tip-off was exactly what Indiana fans had been building toward for weeks. This team had momentum. They had confidence. They had a superstar playing some of the best basketball of her young professional career. Every reason to believe tonight was going to be another statement night for a Fever squad that was clearly trending upward. Phoenix had other plans. From the very first possession, the Mercury came out playing like a team that had studied Indiana's weaknesses all week and circled this game on the calendar. They were physical from the opening tip. Every rebound was a battle. Every drive into the paint came with contact. Every loose ball seemed to end up in Mercury's hands before Indiana players could even react. And the thing is, it wasn't just that Phoenix was playing well. It was that Indiana looked completely unprepared for the level of aggression being thrown at them. Kalia Cooper was an absolute problem from the opening minutes. Every time she got the ball in space, she attacked. She wasn't settling for jump shots. She wasn't letting defenders recover. She was getting exactly where she wanted and making Indiana pay for every defensive mistake with efficiency that felt almost effortless. At the same time, Alyssa Thomas was doing what she has built her entire reputation on throughout her career. Bullying her way into the paint. Winning physical battles. Controlling the glass. Creating second-chance opportunities that put even more pressure on a defense that was already struggling to communicate. The crowd, which had been so loud and so excited just minutes earlier, started to go quiet. That specific silence. The silence of fans who came in expecting a celebration and are slowly realizing something is going wrong, is one of the most uncomfortable sounds in sports. By the time the first quarter was approaching its final minutes, Phoenix had built a lead so large that it stopped feeling like a bad stretch and started feeling like a genuine crisis. 16 points. Indiana was down 16 points at home. The offense couldn't find rhythm. The defense couldn't get stops. Every possession seemed to create a new problem rather than a solution. The players looked frustrated. Communication was breaking down. And on the bench, the body language told a story that made fans even more nervous. Most teams in that position, especially young teams, especially teams that have spent months building confidence, start pressing. They start hunting hero plays. They start trying to erase the deficit with a single possession. Instead of understanding that a comeback is built one stop, one basket, one moment at a time. And that is exactly when the most important thing of the entire night happened. Not a basket, not a defensive stop, not a timeout adjustment. The most important thing was what Caitlin Clark did not do. She did not panic. Here's what I want you to keep in mind as we go through this breakdown, because we're about to get to the confrontation that sent this arena into absolute chaos. But before we get there, I need you to understand what Clark was doing in these quiet moments, because it's the part of the story that almost nobody talks about, and it's the reason everything that happened afterward was even possible. The calm inside the storm. Watch the footage from those early minutes back. Seriously, find it and watch it with the sound off. When Indiana's offense was sputtering, when Phoenix was celebrating every basket, when the crowd was groaning and the deficit was growing, look at Caitlin Clark. She's not throwing her hands up. She's not arguing with officials. She's not standing at half court staring at the scoreboard looking defeated. She's talking. Every time out she's in the middle of the huddle, pointing, communicating, breaking down what she's seeing from Phoenix's defense, identifying where the cracks are, preparing her teammates for what's coming next. That is leadership. Not the kind you read about in motivational posters, the real kind, the kind that happens when things are going badly and one person decides that their reaction to the moment will determine how everyone around them feels about it. There's a concept in high-level sports psychology about the difference between reacting to a situation and responding to it. Reacting is emotional and instinctive. Responding is deliberate and calculated. Most players react. The truly elite ones learn to respond. Clark was responding. She was looking at a 16-point deficit against a veteran Phoenix team and essentially telling herself, okay, this is the situation. Now, what can we do about it? While the scoreboard was telling Indiana the game was slipping away, Clark was reading something completely different. She was watching Phoenix defenders. She was identifying which rotations were arriving late. She was noticing which matchups Indiana could exploit the moment they started playing with more patience. She wasn't thinking about the deficit. She was thinking about the next possession. And slowly, gradually, almost invisibly, the game started to change. It didn't happen with a poster dunk or a highlight reel moment. It happened the way all real momentum shifts happen, piece by piece. A smart pass that created an easy basket. A timely defensive stop. A drive to the basket that drew a foul. A quick transition opportunity that Indiana converted before Phoenix could set up. Nothing that would make a 5-second clip on social media. Everything that changes the direction of a game. The Mercury still had a commanding lead, but something felt different. And the crowd, even through their frustration, could sense it. Then Indiana started stringing possessions together. Clark began attacking with a purpose that felt different from the first quarter. One possession she'd attack the basket and draw contact. Next, she'd pull up from deep. Next, she'd find an open cutter with a perfectly weighted pass. The next, she'd drive to the elbow and dish to a shooter who'd been standing open for a split second. Phoenix's defense started hesitating. Started second-guessing. Started arriving half a step late to every rotation. That's the version of Caitlin Clark that changes games. Not just the one who makes impossible threes. The one who becomes impossible to predict. And just as it felt like Indiana was genuinely building something. Just as the crowd started getting louder and the momentum was clearly shifting. Everything exploded. What I'm about to describe changed the entire emotional temperature of this building in about 4 seconds. And the reaction from one specific Indiana player. It's the moment that has fans still talking days later. Keep watching. The moment everything exploded. Basketball is a game of emotions. No matter how hard coaches try to keep things clinical and analytical. There are moments in every intense game where the emotions take over completely. Where something happens on the floor that stops being about basketball and becomes something much more personal. This was one of those moments. During a physical sequence that had been building with intensity for several possessions, contact occurred between Clark and Phoenix veteran DeWanna Bonner that immediately sent the entire arena into a frenzy. Now, physical play had been present throughout this entire game. The Mercury came in with a reputation for physicality. Every rebound was contested. Every drive came with a body. Neither team was backing down from any contact. That was the established tone of the night. But this moment felt different to everyone inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse. Fans erupted before the officials even made a decision. Players on both benches immediately reacted. The noise level shifted from a loud basketball crowd to something closer to genuine outrage. Replays started circulating almost instantly. Every angle sparked a new debate about what exactly had happened, who was responsible, and what the appropriate response should be. Then came the whistle. And the call that followed left thousands of people inside the arena stunned into momentary silence. Before immediately replacing that silence with the loudest wave of booing you'll hear inside any WNBA arena this season. The officials made a decision that a significant portion of the crowd believed was wrong. Deeply, obviously, infuriatingly wrong. Boos rained down from every section. Players on Indiana's bench expressed visible disbelief. The sense of injustice spread through the building like a wave. Clark's response in this moment was, again, one of the most revealing things about who she is as a competitor. She was frustrated. That was visible to anyone watching. But she channeled that frustration directly back into the game instead of letting it hijack her focus. She didn't argue excessively. She didn't let the call derail her concentration. Instead, she turned and started preparing for the next possession. But not everyone in Indiana was quite as measured in that exact moment. Because while everyone was still processing the call, one player had already made a decision. And her name is Sophie Cunningham. What Cunningham does next is the moment that defines this entire game for Indiana fans. And I want to explain not just what happened, but why it mattered so much more than people realize. Stay right here. Sophie Cunningham's message. There are moments in team sports that don't show up in statistics, don't win awards, and don't generate individual highlights, but that mean more to the culture of a team than almost anything else that happens in a season. Sophie Cunningham just created one of those moments. The second the controversial sequence ended, Cunningham moved. No hesitation. No looking around to gauge how others were reacting first. No calculation about what a technical foul might mean for her personally. She saw a teammate in a situation she didn't like, and her body made the decision before her brain had time to overthink it. She stepped directly into the middle of the storm. Now, in today's professional sports environment, where every player knows that every camera angle is capturing every micro-expression and every movement will be reviewed and debated within minutes on social media, that kind of instinctive, unconditional response tells you everything about a person's character. Cunningham wasn't performing loyalty for the cameras, she was demonstrating it in real time in a moment where the instinct to protect a teammate completely overrode every other consideration. Gainbridge Fieldhouse responded immediately. The building, which had already been building towards something, found its release point. Every fan seemed to be on their feet simultaneously. The noise didn't just get louder, it changed in quality. It went from frustrated crowd loud to fully committed, completely united loud. The kind of noise that physically affects the players on the floor. Indiana's bench was electrified, and here's the part that matters beyond the moment itself. This came at a specific point in the comeback. Indiana had been chipping away at Phoenix's lead. The momentum was already shifting. The crowd was already getting louder. And then this happened. And it was like throwing gasoline on a fire that was already spreading. The emotional jolt that Cunningham's reaction didn't just excite the fans. It changed the atmosphere inside the arena in a way that you could literally see affecting both teams. Indiana's players looked like they'd been plugged into an electric current. Every subsequent possession felt like it was being played at a higher emotional frequency. Phoenix looked like a team that had suddenly realized the environment it was playing in had turned completely hostile. What had started as a road game with a comfortable lead had transformed into something much more difficult to navigate. The boos that followed, particularly when Mercury players stepped to the free throw line in those minutes, created an atmosphere that made every single possession feel enormous. And when a Phoenix free throw rattled out, the eruption from the crowd felt like it was releasing every ounce of frustration that had been building since the game's opening minutes. At that point, emotionally, the game belonged to Indiana. The scoreboard might not have fully confirmed it yet, but inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse, everyone could feel it. The question now was whether Clark and her teammates could turn all of that emotional energy into something concrete on the scoreboard. The answer was devastating for Phoenix. This is where the game gets absolutely ridiculous. Because what Clark does in the next few minutes isn't just good basketball. It's the kind of performance that makes you think about where this team could be by the end of the season. Don't go anywhere. Caitlin Clark takes over. Once Indiana seized momentum, Clark shifted into a gear that Phoenix simply had no answer for. This wasn't the version of Clark that casual fans often focus on, the deep three-pointer from the logo, the possible pull-up from half-court. Those shots exist and they're real. But what happened in the second and third quarters of this game was something more sophisticated and honestly more impressive. It was Clark as a basketball problem that defies solution. Think about what Phoenix was trying to do. They'd already committed extra defensive attention to her. They were contesting her catch points. They were running defenders at her earlier in the shot clock. They were trying everything in their system to disrupt her rhythm. And she was converting anyway. But here's what made it truly devastating. Every time Phoenix overcommit to stopping Clark from scoring, she stopped trying to score. She became a distributor, a passer, a floor general who was a step ahead of every defensive decision the Mercury were making. Phoenix collapses on her drive, the pass is already gone, finding an open shooter in the corner who steps into an easy look. Phoenix runs a second defender at her on the catch. She's already reading the help defender's position and knows exactly where the open player will be before the ball even gets to her. Her defenders shift to take away her left side, she goes right, absorbs the contact, and finishes anyway. This is what elite offensive players do to defenses that are specifically prepared for them. They find the answers that the defense's solution creates. Every adjustment Phoenix made gave Clark a new problem to solve. And she solved all of them. The assists were as impressive as the scoring. Not the easy ones, the precise, visionary passes that require seeing the floor 2 steps ahead of everyone else. Passes that didn't just find open players, but found them exactly where they needed to be to create the easiest possible shot. At one point, Indiana's offense looked like something you'd design in a practice drill. Perfectly synchronized, perfectly timed, perfectly executed under real game pressure against a team with veteran defenders who knew exactly what was coming. The crowd felt every possession. Every basket generated more noise than the one before it. Every defensive stop added another layer of energy to an atmosphere that was already electric. By the numbers, Clark finished with 24 points and 9 assists. Efficient shooting, smart decision-making, virtually no wasted possessions. But numbers missed the most important part. The most important thing Clark did on that floor wasn't score or assist, it was timing. Indiana needed leadership when the game was falling apart. She provided it. Indiana needed offense when nothing was falling. She delivered it. Indiana needed someone to stay composed when the emotional chaos threatened to derail everything. She did that, too. Every time Phoenix appeared on the verge of stopping the bleeding, Clark answered. Every time Indiana needed a momentum-shifting play, she delivered one. That's not statistical dominance. That's something more important. That's the ability to produce exactly what your team needs in the exact moment it needs it most. But here's what I really want you to understand. And this is the part that most people are completely missing when they talk about this game. Clark was incredible. But Indiana didn't win this because of Clark alone. What happened around her is the real story of where this team is headed. Let me show you. The supporting cast that changed everything. Here's the thing about great individual performances. They become truly dangerous when they don't have to carry the entire weight of a team's success alone. 4 months, the primary strategy for defeating Indiana was simple. Slow down Caitlin Clark. Take away her space. Force her into difficult shots. Make her work for everything. And trust that the players around her wouldn't be enough to win. Against Phoenix, that strategy collapsed completely. The first reason was Kelsey Mitchell. While Clark was drawing the overwhelming focus of every Phoenix defender, Mitchell was quietly destroying the strategy from the inside. What makes Mitchell so difficult to neutralize is the variety of ways she can attack. If you give her space, she knocks down perimeter shots. If you close out too aggressively, she's past you before you can recover. Throughout the critical stretch of this game, Phoenix faced that dilemma over and over again. Every time Mercury defenders shifted their attention toward Clark, Mitchell struck. A quick attack off the dribble. A mid-range jumper in traffic. A fast break conversion before Phoenix could get back. Her timing felt specifically designed to punish Phoenix for every second they spent focused on someone else. The impact of that goes beyond the points she scored. Every time Mitchell made Phoenix pay for leaving her, those defenders had to recalibrate their entire approach. Suddenly, they couldn't commit fully to stopping Clark without risking what Mitchell would do. And the moment they split their attention to account for Mitchell, Clark had the space she needed to operate. That's what real offensive depth does to a defense. It doesn't just score more points. It makes every defender on the floor less certain about every decision they make. Then, there was Monique Billings. The impact Billings had on this game won't show up in the highlight packages. It barely shows up in the stat lines. But, watch the game carefully and you'll see something specific happening whenever Indiana was building its most important runs. Billings was winning the dirty battles. Contested rebounds where two players fight for position and only one comes away with the ball. Billings was winning those. Situations where Indiana needed an extra possession, Billings was creating them. Physical challenges in the paint where the Mercury tried to assert dominance in the interior, Billings was meeting every one of them. Those plays don't generate excitement, but they absolutely change the outcome of basketball games. Every offensive rebound Billings secured was an extra opportunity for Indiana. Every contested defensive board she secured was a possession taken away from Phoenix. Over the course of 40 minutes, that accumulates into something that fundamentally shifts the balance of power. And then there was the defense. This is the element of Indiana's performance that got the least attention, but might have been the most impressive. The Mercury, who had looked completely unstoppable in the first quarter, spent most of the second half unable to generate the clean offensive looks that built their early lead on. Passing lanes that had been open were suddenly closed. Driving lanes that Cooper and Thomas had attacked freely were now congested with help defenders arriving exactly on time. Contested shots became the norm rather than the exception. Indiana's defensive intensity didn't just increase. It became something completely different from what they'd shown in the opening minutes. Communication was constant and clear. Rotations were sharp. The willingness to fight through screens and contest every single shot reflected a team that had found something to play for beyond the game itself. They were playing for each other. That's the difference between a collection of talented individuals and a genuine team. Talented individuals play for their own opportunities. Teams play for the next rotation, the next possession, the next moment where someone needs help. Indiana in the second half of this game looked like a team. And by the time the third quarter was winding down, Phoenix had no answers left. The 16-point lead they'd built with such confidence in the opening minutes had not only disappeared, Indiana had built a lead of more than 20 points going in the other direction. That's not a comeback. That's a takeover. We're almost at the final chapter of this breakdown, and I promise you the implications of what we just watched go way beyond one regular season game. The rest of the WNBA should be taking notes right now. Here's why. What this win actually means. When the final buzzer sounded, most of the conversation immediately turned to the highlights: Clark's scoring performance, the confrontation that had everyone talking, the wild comeback that flipped the entire game. All of that is worth talking about, but if that's all you take from this game, you're missing the most important story. Because what Indiana revealed against Phoenix wasn't just that they can win a game, it's that they're becoming a genuinely difficult team to beat. There's a meaningful difference between those two things. Good teams win games. Teams with one great player, some solid role players, and a favorable matchup can win games on any given night. The league is full of those teams. What makes a team dangerous, truly dangerous, the kind of dangerous that other franchises have to think about in their playoff planning, is depth, versatility, and mental toughness. Against Phoenix, Indiana showed all three. They showed depth by having multiple players contribute significantly when the star needed support. Mitchell scoring at crucial moments, Billings dominating the physical battles, different players stepping up at different points of the game to ensure no single player had to carry everything alone. They showed versatility by winning the game multiple ways. They won it with Clark's individual brilliance. They won it with strong team defense. They won it with offensive rebounding. They won it with emotion and crowd energy. No single element of their game had to be perfect because enough elements were good enough. And they showed mental toughness in a way that this franchise has been building toward but hadn't fully demonstrated until this specific night. Falling behind by 16 points on your home court against a physical, experienced team is exactly the kind of situation that reveals who a team really is. The early season questions about Indiana, whether they could handle pressure, whether they could stay composed when things went sideways, whether they had the psychological resilience to compete against elite competition, those questions got answered in a single game. They came back from 16 down and won by over 20. That's not a lucky bounce. That's not a hot shooting night carrying a team over the line. That's a group of players deciding together in real time that they weren't going to accept defeat and then executing well enough to turn that decision into a reality. Caitlin Clark's greatest contribution to this organization isn't her shooting range. It isn't her court vision. It isn't her ability to generate highlights that bring new fans to the sport. Her greatest contribution is that when she stays composed, everyone around her stays composed. When she believes a comeback is possible, her teammates start believing it, too. When she keeps directing and communicating and problem-solving instead of panicking, the entire team reflects that energy back outward. That's the quality that separates good players from transformational ones. And around her, something significant has been quietly developing. Sophie Cunningham's moment showed the league that Indiana has toughness. The willingness to step up for a teammate in a charged moment, to accept consequences without hesitation in defense of someone you play alongside. That's the kind of thing teams spend years trying to build. You can't manufacture that in a team meeting. It has to be real. Kelsey Mitchell showed the league that Indiana's offense doesn't run through one player. Mitchell can score, can attack in multiple ways, and can punish defenses that overcommit to stopping Clark. That changes every defensive game plan Indiana's opponents have to design. Billings and the defensive effort showed the league that Indiana can win ugly. That when the offense isn't flowing perfectly, there's a version of this team that wins through rebounding, physicality, and defensive intensity. Those three elements together, star quality, secondary scoring, defensive toughness, are the foundation of teams that go deep in playoff runs. And Gainbridge Fieldhouse is becoming a genuine home court advantage, not just a nice arena with a supportive fan base, an actual measurable advantage. A place where the crowd amplifies every positive moment, where the energy feeds the players, and where opposing teams are walking into an environment specifically designed to make their lives difficult. Phoenix experienced all of that firsthand. They came in with a 16-point lead, and the game completely slipped away from them. Not because of a single decision or a single failure, but because the entire environment turned against them, and Indiana kept pressing every advantage. The rest of the WNBA saw that. The next time any team prepares to play Indiana on the road, they'll think about this game. They'll think about how quickly a lead can disappear. They'll think about how uncomfortable that building gets when the crowd unites behind a team that believes it can win. They'll think about the fact that Caitlin Clark doesn't need to be perfect to change a game. She just needs a few minutes and a little space. And maybe most importantly, they'll think about what happens when the Fever are fully healthy, fully confident, and fully operating as the team they've been building toward becoming all season. Because this game wasn't Indiana at their ceiling. This was Indiana finding out how high their ceiling might actually be. And that right there, that possibility, that upward trajectory, that growing belief inside a locker room that is starting to understand exactly how dangerous it can be, that's the real story of what happened inside Gainbridge Fieldhouse that night. If this breakdown gave you something you didn't get from watching the highlights alone, hit that like button. It genuinely helps this channel reach more people who actually care about going deeper than the surface. And if you haven't subscribed yet, now is the time because the Fever's season is only getting more interesting from here, and we're going to be breaking down every major moment, every step of the way. Drop in the comments, did you think Indiana had this comeback in them when they were down 16? I want to know what you were thinking at that moment. See you in the next one.